She sits alone. Let that image settle over you for a moment, because it is an image that was designed carefully, deliberately, cruelly designed to break her. Courtroom 7, Harrington County, Superior Court. The room is all dark mahogany and cold marble. High cathedral windows letting in pale November light the color of old ash. The gallery murmurs with attorneys, clerks, observers, and every single one of them seems to belong to someone else. Every single one, except Seraphina Voss-Ashworth. She sits at the plaintiff's table with her leather portfolio open before her, and her hands folded on top of it, perfectly still. Her chair is set slightly apart from the table. Not her choice. The arrangement subtly suggesting isolation, as though even the furniture has been positioned to diminish her. Her navy dress is pressed to precision. Her chignon is immaculate. Her face is a controlled, beautiful mask of composed dignity. And she is entirely, visibly alone. No attorney sits beside her. No family member occupies the gallery row behind her. No hand rests on her shoulder. No whispered reassurance reaches her ear. The row behind her, 3 full wooden benches, stretches empty and silent as an abandoned church pew. Across the aisle, the contrast is almost theatrical in its cruelty. Maxwell Pierce sits surrounded by architecture. His senior attorney, Victoria Hart, is already speaking in low, rapid conference with 2 junior associates. A forensic financial consultant shuffles documents. A personal handler leans forward from the gallery row behind Maxwell, occasionally murmuring in his ear. 6 people in his orbit. 6 people organizing themselves around one man's certainty. And Maxwell is glowing. He leans back in his chair with the posture of a man who has already won, and he tilts his head slowly toward Seraphina's table. His steel-gray eyes travel across the aisle, taking in her solitary figure, her empty rows, her absolute absence of support. A slow, satisfied smile, thin and private and vicious, moves across his lips. He turns back to his attorney and says something low. Victoria Hart glances at Seraphina and permits herself one small, cold smile. And Seraphina, she does not look at either of them. She simply turns one page in her portfolio and waits. The session opens at precisely 9:17 in the morning. Judge Helena Whitmore, 62 years old, wire-rimmed glasses, silver hair cut close to a face that has heard every version of every lie and is moved by none of them, settles herself at the bench and calls the room to order. Her gavel falls once, sharp, definitive, and immediately, as though the gavel were a signal, Victoria Hart rises like a hawk launching from a glove. "Your Honor," Victoria begins, her voice carrying the smooth, oiled confidence of a woman who bills $450 an hour and believes every cent is warranted. "We are here today for the final dissolution hearing in the matter of Pierce versus Voss-Ashworth. My client, Mr. Maxwell Pierce, seeks full enforcement of the prenuptial agreement executed 7 years ago. The terms are clear, legally binding, and ironclad." She pauses. In that pause, she allows herself one measured glance across the aisle. "The respondent," Victoria continues, her tone dropping to something almost gentle, almost pitying, withdrew her legal representation 5 days ago and has chosen to appear today without counsel. As is her right, we will of course proceed accordingly. Withdrew her legal representation. She said it like an epitaph. The gallery rustles. A few junior associates exchange glances. Someone in the back row whispers something to their neighbor. The whisper travels. She came alone. No lawyer. No family. Nobody. But notice what Victoria just said. She withdrew her representation 5 days ago. She had counsel. She released them. Deliberately. This is not the action of a woman who could not find a lawyer. This is the action of a woman executing a specific sequence of events in a specific order, though no one in this room understands that yet. To every observer, it reads simply as defeat, as the quiet, sad capitulation of a woman who ran out of resources before she ran out of marriage, which is exactly what Seraphina needed them to believe. Judge Whitmore peers over her glasses. Ms. Voss-Ashworth, you are representing yourself in these proceedings, at least the present? Seraphina raises her eyes. Amber green, clear as creek water over smooth stone. For the present moment, Your Honor, she replies, her voice low and extraordinarily composed. Yes. The judge's expression remains neutral, but something flickers behind her glasses. A momentary concern quickly shuttered behind professional detachment. Very well. Mr. Pierce's counsel may proceed. Victoria performs rather than proceeds. She walks the room with deliberate steps, distributing document packets. To the bench, the clerk, and pointedly, almost generously, placing one before Seraphina, as though bestowing something on someone incapable of acquiring it themselves. Your Honor, the prenuptial agreement executed on the 14th of March, 7 years ago, clearly stipulates that in the event of dissolution, all marital assets revert entirely to Mr. Pierce. Ms. Voss-Ashworth entered this marriage with no independently verified assets, no income, and no family financial holdings of legal record. She lets the phrase "no family financial holdings of legal record" sit in the room, lets it breathe, lets it expand. In the gallery, Maxwell's handler leans forward and murmurs something. Maxwell nods once, slowly, with the quiet certainty of a man watching a foregone conclusion confirm itself in real time. He does not look at Seraphina again. He stopped looking at her, truly looking at her, somewhere around the 4th year of their marriage, when she became to him not a woman but an arrangement, and eventually not even that. Victoria continues. She speaks of asset division, of the residential properties, 4 homes across 3 states, all titled in Maxwell's corporate name, of the joint investment accounts, of the art collection, their art collection. Pieces Seraphina selected herself with the curators to summon over to understand what is about to happen, to truly understand the magnitude of what Maxwell Pierce has never bothered to know. We must go back, not far, not to childhood, not to the beginning, just far enough to understand one essential truth about Seraphina Eleanor Voss-Ashworth that her husband spent 7 years failing to discover. She did not simplify herself for him because she was without complexity. She simplified herself for him, patiently, protectively, lovingly, because she believed for a long and heartbreaking time that his love was worth the sacrifice. She was wrong, but we are not here to grieve that. We are here to watch the undoing of his ignorance. The name Voss, her mother's maiden name, is the name of one of the oldest private banking families in Northern Europe. 3 generations of Voss wealth, built on Swiss finance, land holdings across 5 countries, and a reputation for discretion so absolute that their name almost never surfaces in public financial records. Almost, because discretion was not modesty. Discretion was strategy. When you are truly wealthy, not merely rich but dynastically, architecturally wealthy, you do not advertise. You insulate. Her grandmother, Eleanor Margaret Voss, was born into this legacy and then, in a move that scandalized European society in 1962, married a self-made American industrialist named Gerald Ashworth II, a man of no old money, but magnificent intelligence and ferocious ambition. Together they built a hybrid empire spanning private banking, agricultural land holdings, pharmaceutical manufacturing, and 3 charitable foundations. Their son, Gerald Ashworth III, Seraphina's father, inherited all of it and built further. Seraphina was raised in the Somerset estate in England until she was 12, then the Connecticut manor. At 17, she spent a year in Geneva with her grandmother, not in formal study, but in something more comprehensive than formal study. She sat beside Eleanor Voss at private meetings and learned the language of money, not its spending, its architecture. She can read a financial statement the way a musician reads sheet music. She can identify a fraudulent trust structure in the time it takes someone else to read the title page. She did not tell Maxwell any of this. This requires explanation. First, she loved him. When she married Maxwell Pierce, she married him as Seraphina, not as an heiress, not as a portfolio. She wanted to be loved as a woman, and for a time, she believed she was. Second, her father is not a man who overrides his daughter's choices. Gerald Ashworth III believes in the architecture of her autonomy. He waits to be invited. He had been waiting quietly for 3 years. The invitation came 7 days ago. One text message. Papa, I think it's time. Bring grandmother. Third, and this is what matters most, Seraphina had been building something, not a case, a trap. 3 years ago, she reached into a desk drawer for a notepad and found documents she was not looking for: financial records, trust instruments, asset disclosures, and beside them, Maxwell's original prenuptial financial submission. In 30 seconds of reading, she understood what he had hidden. She closed the drawer. She called her grandmother. Eleanor Voss's voice on the phone that night was neither panicked nor warm. It was precise. Don't react, my darling. File it away. Wait. We do not react. We respond. And we respond when the moment is entirely our own. So Seraphina waited. She documented. She preserved. She had Dr. Amelia Grant, the Voss Family Forensic Financial Counsel, a woman who has testified before international arbitration panels, conduct a quiet, thorough, completely private audit of Maxwell's disclosed prenuptial financials against his actual holdings. And Dr. Grant found everything. But here's the thing about the prenuptial agreement. That 56-page document that Maxwell's team drafted with such confidence, buried on page 44, was a provision they had inserted believing it would never matter. Seraphina had read back in the courtroom, 11:43 in the morning. Victoria Hart has been speaking for over 2 hours. She is magnificent in her confidence, a high-performance machine at full efficiency, producing documents, citing precedents, building a legal edifice so polished that several gallery observers nod unconsciously, the way one nods at well-performed music. Maxwell Pierce has not shifted his posture once. He sits with one hand resting proprietarily on the edge of the table and watches the proceedings with the detachment of a man who has already signed the check and is simply waiting for the valet. Seraphina has asked 3 questions during the 2-hour session. 3, each one small, each one quiet, each one surgically precise. A request of the court record to formally document a specific date, a specific transaction reference, a specific filing number. Each time she asked, Victoria's eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. The questions were too specific for a self-represented litigant, too targeted. But in the momentum of the session, each was granted and noted, and the proceedings moved on. No one understands yet what she has been constructing. No one except, perhaps, Judge Whitmore, who has been watching Seraphina with an attention subtly elevated beyond professional interest. At 11:51, the rear doors of the courtroom open briefly. A clerk enters, delivers a document to the court registry desk, and exits. Nothing remarkable. The gallery barely registers it. But Seraphina's amber-green eyes move, just once, to the rear of the room, and something so subtle crosses her face that only someone watching very closely would catch it. A breath, a controlled, private, almost infinitesimal release of tension in her shoulders. The relaxation of a single muscle group that has been held rigid since 9:17 this morning, like a woman who has just heard footsteps she has been waiting for. At 12:07, Judge Whitmore calls a 30-minute recess. The room rises, reorganizes itself with the casual ease of people who believe the afternoon holds no surprises. Maxwell stands, buttons his jacket with practiced efficiency, and moves toward his team. He says something that produces low, easy laughter, the laughter people with power quietly appreciating their own inventory. One of the junior associates, gathering papers near the side window, happens to glance into the building's main corridor. He stops gathering papers. His hands go still. He stares. Mr. Pierce. Not now, David. Sir, I think. I said. Maxwell turns, mildly irritated, and follows his associate's eye line to the corridor visible between two closing elevator doors. A figure, silver-haired, moving with the unhurried gravity of someone who has never once rushed. Because in 68 years of living, the world has always rearranged itself to wait. Maxwell blinks. The elevator doors close. Who was that? He asks, almost to himself. The associate doesn't answer, because he doesn't know. But the certainty that was so luminous in Maxwell Pierce's chest a moment ago flickers, just once, like a candle in a wind that has not yet arrived. During the 30-minute recess, Seraphina does not leave the courtroom. She cannot afford to leave, not because she is restricted, but because she has constructed her composure this morning like a piece of architecture, and she knows, with the precision of someone who knows herself completely, that as she steps into a corridor, finds herself in any space alone and unobserved, the architecture might crack. So she stays. She sits at her table with her portfolio open and her pen in hand, and she stares at a page she is not reading. The clerk at the front desk organizes files. A janitor moves quietly along the far wall. Two attorneys from an unrelated matter speak, in low voices by the windows. The gallery is nearly empty. In this almost empty room, in this 30-minute interlude of institutional silence, Seraphina Voss-Ashworth allows herself one moment of absolute privacy. She sets her pen down. She places both hands flat on the table. She closes her eyes. And we see what composure costs. We see it in the slight trembling of her fingers, so minor, so perfectly contained. It reads not as weakness, but as evidence of the extraordinary effort required to prevent collapse. We see it in the working of her throat as she swallows something, grief, perhaps fear, perhaps 7 years of accumulated silence that has never been given a room of its own. She thinks of the house, the Connecticut house where she chose every room's color, every painting, every garden arrangement, and which a legal document now classifies as not hers. She thinks of the night 3 years ago when she found the financial records in his desk, not looking, truly not looking, reaching for a notepad, and understanding in 30 seconds of reading what he had hidden before their marriage. The properties declared as underwater, the trusts omitted entirely, the deliberate, quiet misrepresentation that made the prenuptial agreement not merely unfair, but fraudulent. She thinks of her grandmother's voice on the phone that night. Don't react, my darling. Wait. We respond when the moment is entirely our own. She opens her eyes. The courtroom is still cold and quiet. There is no one behind her. From the outside, to any observer, she remains a most profoundly solitary figure in a room designed to amplify loneliness. She looks at the empty benches behind her, and for one terrible human moment, she looks like a woman who was left behind by the whole world. One single tear begins to form at the corner of her left eye. She blinks it away, lifts her chin, reopens her portfolio, picks up her pen, and in the corridor outside, 3 sets of footsteps begin moving toward the courtroom door. One set measured and steady, one set slow and deliberate, accompanied by the quiet tap of a silver-tipped cane, and one set quick, professional, carrying the weight of document cases. The session resumes at 12:42. Judge Whitmore settles at the bench. The gavel falls. The room comes to order. Victoria Hart is on her feet immediately, a new document packet prepared, her confidence rebuilt by 30 minutes and a working lunch. Your Honor, if we may continue with the asset valuation. The rear doors of Courtroom 7 open. Not dramatically, not thrown open, not announced, but slowly, with the deliberate authority of something enormous moving at its own pace, entirely indifferent to the rhythm of everything around it. The mahogany doors part, and the sound of them carries through the sudden quiet of the gallery the way the first note of symphony carries through a concert hall before the audience has finished falling silent. Everyone turns. It is what human beings do when something enters a room and commands orientation without asking for it. Victoria Hart turns. The junior associates turn. The court reporter's fingers pause above her keys. And Maxwell Pierce turns. Gerald Ashworth III enters first. 6 feet and 3 inches, moving with the unhurried certainty of a man who has never, in 68 years, needed a hurry. His three-piece suit absorbs the courtroom's pale light without reflecting it. The silver eagle-headed cane strikes the marble floor with each step. Strike, step, strike, step, a rhythm that is almost military, almost ceremonial, almost like a clock ticking in a room where everyone has just remembered that time belongs to someone. His face is composed, leonine, and extraordinary. His amber eyes, Seraphina's eyes, move across the room in one sweeping, unhurried assessment and come to rest on his daughter's figure at the plaintiff's table. Something moves in those eyes, something enormous and private and carefully contained. He does not rush to her. He simply arrives, and his arrival rearranges the room the way a mountain rearranges the landscape around it. Behind him, Eleanor Margaret Voss enters the courtroom, 87 years old, 5 feet and 5 inches of concentrated human legacy. She moves with silver-tipped cane, in a dove-gray suit and 3 strands of natural pearls, a golden family crest brooch at her lapel, catching the light like a declaration. Her white hair is in a perfect French twist. Her posture is so correct it borders on the miraculous. Her face is the face of someone who has lived long enough to know exactly what she is looking at, and is entirely unimpressed by all of it except one thing: the navy-dress figure of her granddaughter, sitting alone at a table in this cold marble room. When Eleanor Voss's amber-green eyes, the same eyes, 3 generations deep, find Seraphina's profile across the room, the old woman's chin lifts by precisely 1 degree. It is the most powerful gesture in the room. Behind them both, moving in controlled professional silence, Cornelius Ashworth, senior barrister, silver-haired, gold-rimmed glasses, dark green velvet tie. And beside him, Dr. Amelia Grant, forensic financial counsel, wire-rimmed glasses, gray wool jacket, carrying a document case with the focused care of a surgeon carrying instruments. Behind them, 2 junior associates with labeled document boxes. The gallery does not erupt. These are people trained in expensive room behavior. But the whispers move anyway. Low, controlled, almost involuntary. Who is that? Do you know who that is? The court reporter's fingers have not moved for 14 seconds. Judge Whitmore removes her glasses, examines them with the careful movement of a woman giving herself 2 seconds to recalibrate, and replaces them. And Maxwell Pierce undergoes a transformation so complete it would be almost cinematic if it were not so deeply, satisfyingly real. The color, that healthy, golfing holiday tan, drains from his face at a speed suggesting his body has understood something his mind is still refusing. His lips part very slightly. His hand, which has rested with such relaxed proprietariness on the edge of that table for 3 hours, tightens. His gray eyes move from Gerald Ashworth to Eleanor Voss to Cornelius Ashworth to the labeled document cases. And in those eyes, behind the shock, something fragile and fundamental begins to crack. He does not recognize these people. He has never seen them before. He does not know who they are. And that ignorance, that monumental, 7-year, willful, catastrophic ignorance, is written across his face as the worst and most irreversible thing that has ever happened to him. Gerald Ashworth reaches the plaintiff's table. He does not announce himself. He does not speak to the court. He places one large, steady hand on his daughter's shoulder. Seraphina's hand comes up from the table and covers his, just for one breath. Then her hand returns to the portfolio. Gerald takes a seat beside her. Cornelius Ashworth smoothly assumes his position as her legal counsel, placing his credentials before the bench with quiet efficiency. Dr. Amelia Grant takes the chair to Cornelius's left and opens her document case with the focused calm of someone who has done this before and found it conclusive every time. Eleanor Voss moves to the gallery row directly behind her granddaughter and takes her seat. Upright, serene, her silver-tipped cane before her, her extraordinary face arranged in the expression of a woman watching a performance she already knows the ending of. Victoria Hart, who has not spoken in 49 seconds, turns to Maxwell Pierce with the controlled urgency of a general whose battlefield has rearranged itself overnight. Maxwell, very low, very controlled. Who are these people? Maxwell's answer is barely audible. I don't. He stops. I've never. Judge Whitmore's gavel falls. Order. We will have order. She looks at Cornelius Ashworth. Counsel, please identify yourself and the nature of this appearance. Cornelius rises, and when he speaks, in a voice that is the verbal equivalent of dark with paneling in old books and absolute, unhurried authority, the room falls into a listening so complete it has a physical quality. Your Honor, Cornelius Ashworth of Ashworth, Voss and Pemberton, appearing on behalf of the respondent, Miss Seraphina Eleanor Voss-Ashworth. A measured pause. Beside me is Dr. Amelia Grant, Forensic Financial Counsel, retained to conduct an independent audit of the financial disclosure submitted with the prenuptial agreement currently under review. He opens the document case. He removes a bound report, comprehensive tab cross-referenced, and places it on the table with a quietness that somehow makes it seem louder than anything else that has happened in this room today. Your Honor, in the matter of Pierce versus Voss-Ashworth, the respondent's position is as follows. The prenuptial agreement signed by both parties on March 14th required complete and accurate financial disclosure from both parties as a condition of the document's legal validity. Mr. Pierce has submitted disclosure listed 3 primary real estate holdings, 2 investment accounts, and declared net worth of approximately $4.7 million. He turns one page. Dr. Grant's forensic audit, conducted over 14 months across multiple financial jurisdictions, has established that Mr. Pierce held, at the time of signing, 2 additional offshore property trusts for undisclosed investment instruments and a liquid asset position exceeding $19 million, none of which appeared in his prenuptial disclosure. He closes the report. He folds his hands. We will be submitting the full documentary record to the court, and we will be asking the court to examine, in its application to these established facts, Clause 17 of the prenuptial agreement itself. The silence that follows is the kind of silence that entire courtroom careers are built around. Victoria Hart's red-nailed hand goes very still on her desk. Maxwell Pierce makes a sound, not a word, not a denial, more the sound of a man who has just stepped onto what he believed was solid ground and felt it give way entirely beneath him, and from a row behind the plaintiff's table, without moving, without turning her head, without shifting 1 degree in her perfect posture, Eleanor Margaret Voss turns to look just once at Maxwell Pierce. She says nothing. She doesn't need to. The look alone is sufficient. Your Honor, Victoria Hart says, and the effort required to keep her voice level is visible in the slight tension of her jaw. We would request a continuance to review the submitted materials. The documentation was filed with the court registry at 8:47 this morning. Cornelius replies, pleasantly and precisely, the way a man states a fact that was always going to be a fact. Your team received access notification at 9:02, 14 minutes before the session commenced. A pause. We are prepared to proceed. Judge Whitmore opens a bound forensic report. She turns to the tab marked Forensic Summary, Asset Comparison. She reads in silence for 40 seconds, an enormous amount of time in a courtroom, while every person in the room holds their breathing to a minimum. Then she looks up. Ms. Hart, the judge says in the tone of a woman who has made a preliminary assessment and is being professional about it, I am looking at a side-by-side comparison of Mr. Pierce's prenuptial financial disclosure and the findings of an independent forensic audit. The figures are not similar. They are not in the range of accounting variation or good faith estimation. The gap here is substantial. Victoria Hart says nothing. For the first time today, she has no immediate response. Before we proceed further, Judge Whitmore continues, I want to examine the prenuptial agreement itself in the context of the submission. She looks at Cornelius. You reference Clause 17. Please direct the court's attention to that provision. Yes, Your Honor. Cornelius opens the prenuptial agreement to page 44. He reads aloud, and his voice is so composed, so completely without theatricality, that the words land with the clean, devastating force of something that simply is. Clause 17. Financial disclosure integrity. In the event that either party is demonstrated, through documentary evidence accepted by a court of competent jurisdiction, to have materially misrepresented their financial position in the disclosure submitted as a condition of this agreement, including but not limited to the deliberate omission of assets, liabilities, or financial instruments, the agreement in its entirety, and specifically its provisions governing asset division upon dissolution, shall be rendered null and void, and dissolution proceedings shall proceed under applicable state equitable distribution law. He closes the document. He removes his glasses. He places both on the table with the quiet finality of a man who has said everything that needs saying. Judge Whitmore holds out her hand. The clerk brings her the prenuptial agreement. She opens it to page 44 herself. She reads, not the summary, not the paraphrase, the actual clause, every word, in silence. The courtroom waits. Then Judge Whitmore sets the document down. She looks across the room at Maxwell Pierce, and she says in a voice of complete, measured judicial authority, the court has read Clause 17. Its application to the evidence before this court is unambiguous. She pauses. Mr. Pierce, you spent 7 years relying upon the very document that contains a provision now defeating your position. She sets down her glasses. We will recess for 1 hour, while this court reviews the full forensic submission. When we return, counsel for both parties will be prepared to address the question of equitable distribution under applicable state law. The prenuptial agreement, given these findings and the operation of Clause 17, will not be the operative instrument in this dissolution. Victoria Hart's voice, when it comes, has lost its architecture entirely. Your Honor, we would still request. The request for continuance is denied, Ms. Hart. The gavel falls, and that sound, that single, clean, definitive sound, lands in Maxwell Pierce's chest like something structural giving way. He stands. He shouldn't. He stands without his attorney's instruction, without strategic intent, because some primitive part of him still believes that his height, his suit, the body language that has commanded rooms for 2 decades will somehow alter what has just been said. It does not help him. He looks at Gerald Ashworth III. Gerald Ashworth looks back at him from a face that holds no anger, no triumph, and no mercy. Only the quiet, enormous patience of a man who has always known this moment was coming and has been entirely comfortable waiting for it. Who are you? Maxwell Pierce says, and it comes out less like a question than like the last line of a script that has been taken from him entirely. Gerald Ashworth regards him for a long moment. The way he regards something that has caused damage to something precious and must be assessed before you respond. I am her father, Gerald says. Quietly, completely, as though those 4 words are the full and sufficient answer to every question Maxwell Pierce has ever had the profound audacity not to ask. And from a gallery row, from the dove-gray suit and the 3-strand of pearl and the golden family crest catching the November light, Eleanor Margaret Voss speaks, for the first and only time in these proceedings. Her voice is not loud. It has not needed to be loud for 87 years. Young man, she says, and the phrase young man contains within it the entire architecture of her bloodline, her patience, and her absolute, serene contempt for the specific variety of foolishness she is looking at. You marry my granddaughter believing she had nothing. A pause. We allowed you to believe that. Another pause. Quieter, more devastating. Consider this your education. Maxwell Pierce sits down. Not by choice. His legs simply decide. And in Seraphina's amber-green eyes, for the first time since 9:17 this morning, something lights. The ruling comes 18 days later. The prenuptial agreement is voided in its entirety under Clause 17. Dissolution proceedings move forward under applicable equitable distribution law. The marital estate, the 4 properties in investment accounts, the art collection Seraphina chose painting by painting over 7 years, is subject to fair division, assessed on the merits, decided by evidence. But the numbers, ultimately, are not the story. The story is what happens when Seraphina walks out of Courtroom 7 on the day the ruling is handed down, and her father is there, standing in the marble corridor in a bespoke suit with a silver eagle cane and his amber eyes, and he opens his arms, and she walks into them the way she did when she was 12 years old, and the world was still a place she was just beginning to understand. The story is that she is the one who found the documents. She is the one who made the call. She is the one who waited. 3 years, with the patience of someone who understood that the most powerful moves are made when the opponent believes the game is already over. Her family did not rescue her. She invited them in, at the exact moment she had chosen, to deliver the evidence she had spent 3 years building. And behind Gerald, seated in a wheelchair for the long corridor, because 87 years is a long time to stand, Eleanor Margaret Voss reaches up one fine, translucent hand as her granddaughter bends to her and cups Seraphina's face in that hand, and says, "Only this. Voss women do not end. We continue." Maxwell Pierce learns in the months that follow what it costs to have been catastrophically, willfully incurious about the person he chose to diminish. He learns it in legal settlements and in professional reputation, and in the particular, lasting silence of rooms that once welcomed him growing very quiet when his name appears. He learns it the way all people who underestimate the quiet ones eventually learn it, completely, and too late, and Seraphina. Seraphina returns to the Connecticut state, the one she chose, the one she painted and planted and filled with art and light. She sits in the garden on an October morning, her grandmother beside her, a cup of tea in her hands. The autumn light falls through old trees the color of ambergreen. She is not alone. She has never, in truth, been alone. She had known that all along. Before you go, I want to hear from you. 1. Have you ever been a person in the room that others underestimated? Or have you underestimated someone and discovered how wrong you were? What did that moment of revelation feel like? 2. Seraphina waited 3 years with that evidence before acting. Could you have held your patience that long? Or would the weight of knowing have broken you first? 3. Eleanor Voss said, "We allowed you to believe that." Is that strategy? Is it grace? Or is it something more powerful than both? The choice of a person who has always known their own worth and has simply been waiting for the right moment to let someone else discover it? If this story moved you, if it reminded you that the most powerful people in a room are often the quietest ones, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Subscribe to Karma's Heiress, because every story we tell is for the woman who was told she had nothing, She always had everything. She had simply not yet chosen to show it.